What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Horrorheads podcast. I am Rich Mallery here with my co-host, Jerry Lourenco.
Hey, what's up?
Not much, man. Super stoked to get into it today. You can follow us on Instagram at horrorheadspodcast or email us your love and hate at horrorheadspodcast@gmail.com. So I'm super stoked today because we're going to talk about one of, I wouldn't say it's my favorite franchise, but some of the films I really love a lot. We're going to talk about Nightmare on Elm Street. But before we do that, we do have a special guest today who I'm really stoked to talk to. Mike from Whiskey Morgue is here.
Woo! Hell yeah.
What's up, Mike?
How's it going? I'm super pumped to be here.
Awesome. So Mike is a horror fan, podcast host, whiskey expert. And in about 30 seconds, he's going to lead us through a whiskey tasting. We have selected 2 different bourbons we're going to drink today. I have Maker's Mark right here, which to me, I was just telling somebody, like, I actually love Maker's Mark. It's just a nice, affordable bourbon, and it's smooth and everything. And we have Woodford Reserve, which everybody loves, and we talk about it all the time. So yeah, so Mike's we're gonna kind of give him the reins for a little bit, and he's gonna kind of tell us a little bit about like what we should be doing, and it's probably gonna make Jerry and I look pretty stupid because
yeah, Mike. So I'm sure if you checked out the podcast before, you probably hear Rich and I like really kind of destroying our reviews of bourbons, and I'm sure like other whiskey drinkers around the world are just cringing and hitting the stop button immediately as soon as we open our mouth. So we're hoping to get a little bit of an education today. And really try to get some other people who are excited about horror films and bourbon as well. So, I mean, I feel like this is long overdue. This has been like we've been talking for so long. I feel like we should have been drinking bourbon much sooner, but here we are.
Yeah, you know what? Well, thank you guys for having me first off. When I knew when we connected and I realized you guys talk horror and drink whiskey. I mean, you guys drink out some other things too, but when I found that was kind of like the premise of it, I was like, well, this is like a match made in heaven or hell, but like yeah, I was super pumped to do this. I mean, we've kind of been talking in the background for a while. Before we get started, I'd say the number one thing is like I don't think you can really butcher tasting notes or like a tasting experience. Like I think everybody kind of brings their own thing to the table, and sometimes I even get kind of weary about like doing notes because they can kind of be subjective. And for me, I think the biggest takeaway is kind of like I really like colognes, so it maybe this is some connection how I got into whiskey, but it brings me back to a particular time and place. So I think like whatever you associate it with it, because I used to see tasting notes and someone's like, this tastes like grandma's blueberry pie. And I'm like, fuck you. It doesn't taste like grandma's blueberry pie.
Maybe not your grandma's blueberry pie.
Yeah, like maybe my grandmother was shit at baking, but rest her soul. But like no, like the idea is that like maybe for that person, like the smell, there's something about it that like pops. And that's the place that it brings them to. So I've become a lot more lenient in kind of like my judgment of notes. But I will say this before we jump in. The 2 that we've chosen, I kind of like that we went with like what you can find at any bar, like literally almost anywhere in the world. And, doing what I do on my end, it's very easy to start nerding out over like really rare bottles. I know, Jerry, we've kind of gone into it over like finding certain bottles. Yeah. At the end of the day, I know you guys are into like entertainment and stuff. Like you go to a concert, you're not going to find like Booker's Reserve sitting there to sip on. It's like, here's Maker's, here's Woodford. And these are like 2 that I always come back to. So I kind of like that we accidentally stumbled on them. Like we were kind of like throwing ideas around and like, why not? So I think it's cool to kind of revisit some of the classics. I guess we're doing that in film too. But yeah, it's fun. So I'm going to start with Maker's Mark.
Oh, awesome. Okay.
And I got to pick out my special Whiskey Morgue Maker's Mark bottle.
That is
that is
sick.
super cool. Yeah, so for those who can't see video, because I am too lazy to edit the video, Mike just held up a bottle of Maker's that has his logo, Whiskey Morgue, on it, which is super cool. And if I had that, we'd be showing the video if I had that.
Yeah,
because I'd be showing that.
You know what I'd be doing with that? I would just be using that bottle and then pouring in the cheapest shit I could find in there and telling everyone they're drinking my bourbon. That's what I would be doing.
Yeah, you know what? I don't really like touch it. I think, and I thought, for this episode, it's fitting because the ambassador of Maker's Mark for at least Eastern Canada, because I'm up in Toronto, her and I became great friends, and that was kind of a Christmas gift that she got for me. So yeah, like Maker's is like near and dear to my heart.
We need to make better friends because no friends are sending me bottles of whiskey. Yeah, so Mike, I have not poured yet because I wanted to ask if we're doing this neat or how you want to do
I
this.
typically do it neat, but I'll be honest, like most times I had makers in my life, was probably just on rocks or in a cocktail. But I kind of like exploring it neat and then from there kind of doing what you want with it. The cool thing about these two bourbons is that they're both almost similar in mash bill, but the Maker's Mark, instead of the like 18% rye is in the Woodford, but for Maker's Mark they use the red winter wheat. So this is a wheated bourbon. And that's what gives it more of that like sweet that sweet note. A lot of wheated bourbons kind of are associated with like a little bit of a sweeter tasting notes and a little bit less of that rye spice. If you guys want to go like whole nosing and
Let's do
Yeah,
it.
man.
Let's go crazy.
Okay, let's go.
do
All
it,
right.
man.
I
We're here.
got-
We're here. We're here.
I got nowhere to go, so you tell us what we do. All right. All right. So I just poured, and it's funny because you can get makers pretty much anywhere you go. There's like, I do have a lot of options for where to go for liquor, but I always go to Bevmo because it's the cheapest. And Bevmo actually did not have makers when I went there. They were out. And I was like, how are you out of like the most common thing? So I did have to go to like a liquor store.
here's my intro. I'm like the most reliable.
Yeah, I could.
find
They
anywhere.
actually did not have it, and
Cut
I
that
was
out.
shocked. And I had to pay $10 more than I normally pay, but worth it. And I'm gonna enjoy this extra much. Okay, so I poured myself a shot. For those of you who can't see, Mike and Jerry both have these glasses that are wide at the bottom and are thin at the top. I have like a regular rocks glass, which is actually a Halloween.
Yeah, you
Halloween
know what?
themed rocks
It's a
glass, and
legit
that's what I'm
glass,
using.
and it works either way. I mean, the nosing glass is kind of more if you're getting snobby with it. I mean, me and Jerry have gone off the deep end with with the snobbery.
I'm not bougie. Yeah, I'm simple.
I have another one here just in case. So I'm prepared.
Yeah, but this one I off the bat, like again, I said that sweetness, like so the caramel, vanilla, like anything if you think of quintessential bourbon, even if you're loosely familiar, a little bit of like gentle baking spice, you get on there. It probably makes sense why this is like my wife's a baker, and this is like what she always uses as her vanilla.
Oh,
So
that's
she'll
awesome.
she'll put like her vanilla pods or like I guess beans in a bottle of Makers, because for her even like that sweetness, those like quintessential bourbon notes, the vanilla, the caramel are all there. And even though it's a little bit softer at a lower proof, because we're at 45%, so
90, yeah.
yeah, 90 proof, pretty standard. Yeah, so let's have a sip of it.
Yeah, all right. So everybody at
Cheers.
home, I know no one's working right now listening to this podcast, and you're at home drinking, hopefully. So here we go.
Have a drink with us. Cheers,
All right,
everyone.
cheers.
Cheers, guys.
It's very interesting that you said that about vanilla because I don't know if I ever picked up on that before. I always notice that sweet caramel taste to it, but I am actually, I don't know if you just put it in my brain or I'm actually like looking for it, but I do get that vanilla, which maybe explains why I like Makers so much because I am a big fan of vanilla.
They
Yeah.
do say like the tasting notes are very like influential. Like if someone sets you up for it, I kind of see how it can kind of steer you in that direction. But yeah, like I think like the nose is kind of like the palate kind of follows suit with the nose. But what I really like about like the standard Makers is the citrus. Like I know a lot of people want to go for something spicier typically in like an old fashioned or whatever, but I'm totally good with using Makers just because it already has a little bit of that orange zest citrus note in there already.
Man, I wish I was picking that up right now. So
I do get like the floral spices that you suggested. I think I've always gotten that. I just didn't know how to describe it. And that's the thing
Yeah.
that Jerry and I get into. We're just not sure how to describe these things.
describe it because it doesn't actually taste like vanilla per se. It's not like vanilla ice cream or something like that. It's
Yeah.
more like a vanilla bean or something like that. And that translated into like a liquid. It's just kind of hard to like vocalize that, like to be like it's it's like
Yeah, it can
like,
be
I taste
misleading if this
something.
is for someone new. Yeah, definitely you're not going to sip it and be like, this is a vanilla ice cream.
Yeah.
But yeah, I get more of like, yeah, and maybe, and who knows, again, like, so even for me, maybe it is because it's like the baking bourbon in the house that I get the vanilla bean. And that's just because I'm constantly see a bottle with a bunch of vanilla beans in it, or I see it used in some of the stuff that we bake around the house. But yeah, definitely like, kind of what Rich said, the gentler spices. And I think this is what makes Makers a little bit more approachable, and it's pretty light. I mean, maybe for me,
Oh
I'm kind
yeah.
of used to drinking high proof stuff, and I've gotten far into that. But like, it's nice. Like it's not a super long finish. But I think like in terms of neat on ice, this is like a super drinkable bourbon, and maybe that's why it's so approachable universally and why you can kind of find it anywhere.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
one
I
that
think
I buy a lot, and I think early on when I started, saying I was a bourbon drinker, I think I was very against it because I'm like, oh, it's like so common, it's like, it's fairly price sensitive. But yeah, like they pack a lot in. I get why it's a classic.
it's so
It's
good.
funny because you mentioned price sensitive because, I've been doing like the bourbon whiskey thing maybe for like 9 years now, online for like 4 or 5, but I once got into it because it was the affordable whiskey. And because of stuff like makers where you're like, yeah, you know what, like anybody can pick it up, or you'd find certain bottles that were like phenomenal, and you think, how is this like 12-year-old bourbon, $50? But that's drastically changed.
Yes.
And we saw that take off, and especially during COVID and whatnot, like it just like it went crazy. And some will say even the bubble might have burst a bit, but I think what it comes down to is like bourbon should be accessible, and it's supposed to be the affordable drink.
So while we're talking about makers really quick, and this is just the generic makers, other than Mike has his Whiskey Morgue edition makers. So this is like a pretty cheap, affordable bourbon, but Makers makes a lot of different bourbons, and some are more high end. And for me, like this is already really smooth, and I always associate like higher priced bourbon with being smoother. How do some of the others compare, and are there like what other ones should we look out for tasting wise? Like what do you recommend?
I think if someone was gonna graduate from like say they drank standard makers, Makers 101 is a really nice jump in proof a little bit. So I guess you're going up 11 proof points, and there's a little bit more like oak. I'll say like I always get like a really like chocolate note off of Makers once you get into like some of the higher proof or a little bit more aged stuff. Yeah, I think 101 is absolutely great. Makers 46. I think they're still doing that. There's like the regular one and the cask strength. So Makers has got really famous for using like different staves to finish their whiskey. So a lot of like the other stuff, whether it be experimental, their private selections, it's all based around what kind of different like toasted staves they use to finish the bourbon.
I'll have to try some of those because I always like. I know you mentioned chocolate because I said this last episode. My favorite bourbon is Woodford Double Oaked, and I like that
Yeah.
because it is like chocolatey. It's very different, and I haven't come across another bourbon like that. So that makes me want to really go out and try some of
That actually
these.
makes a lot of sense because the double oak process, right? They put in another barrel, and that's why it gets a little bit more depth and color, and you get a little bit more of those like deeper chocolate notes. So all like the maker's private select stuff, and then even like the 46 is using those staves. So it's kind of like a hack to a double oak. They're putting those staves into the barrel, letting those kind of soak there for a while, and bring on some extra flavor. And what's genius about like when you get into like their private selection is they let you pick, I forget how many combinations of like how many different staves they have, but you get to use like 10 staves, and you can divvy it up across the 5 different versions they have. So like the possibilities are endless. You can do like 2 mocha staves, and 5 French, and then like you could just allocate like however many staves you want to use and use all these combos. So it's kind of cool in that sense that you can spend forever like trying, a Bevmo store pick of makers that's completely different from the store down the street who also did a private select and chose a different combination of staves, which is really cool.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that, and yeah, we're committed to this for the long
Yeah,
term.
we're
So
gonna drink a lot of makers. So
we're down to try it.
how many different combinations? I'm not sure there's enough. Hold on.
I failed grade 10 math and became an English teacher, so
So I always, and again, if anyone's ever listened here, I'm always saying like I get a lot of caramel from bourbon, especially when I'm drinking it neat. And I just wonder if I'm being fooled by like the color and what like I'm looking at. I feel like I'm looking at something that's like rich and caramelly, and then as all of a sudden that's exactly what I taste. Now, am I just fooling myself, or that's what I get
no, I
nervous
think I
about.
think like I've had a couple there's that one whiskey, Mellow Corn, that's almost like I think it is 100% corn whiskey. Or I've
Mm.
had some that are like the mash bill is like 99% corn. And a lot of those are really like overtly caramel bombs. So I think like there is this like when the corn is distilled and it's put into the oak, whatever goes on in there and kind of like the wood science, I do think like it actually is the most correct. And I think maybe that's why it's kind of our default is that we get caramels or vanillas, like from the wood tannins or the oak tannins. And I know there are people who are like super dedicated to it. I was talking to one Canadian distiller, and he actually like studies the art of like what the wood does to the whiskey. And there's actually like compounds that explain like a banana flavor. Like if you drank like, Old Forester, and everyone's like, I get that banana, or Jack Daniels, for instance, right? So there's actually something that's the distillate interacting with the wood, or the type of wood and type of like char, that will bring that out. So, as much as like I think like, it can get kind of willy-nilly throwing tasting notes around, I think I think you're right, Jerry. Like that's why we come back always to the caramel.
Yeah, that's awesome. And Rich, I think we're sleeping, man, because we're just guzzling, and there's people trying to figure out why it tastes like banana and what exactly is causing that without actually sticking a banana in there. So I'm pretty amazed right now, and learning a lot. This is amazing. So just for anyone who is trying this at home and maybe taking some sips for the first time, Mike, is there like, should they take a sip? Do they let it linger for a while? Do they just kind of let it hit the back of their throat? Do they keep it on their tongue? Do they swallow quickly? What would you say would be the best way for them to get the full flavor, and maybe like what's kind of like exaggerated and just kind of silly to do?
I mean, I've seen some people do some weird things when they taste it, but like I kind of let it sit for a second on my tongue.
Mhm.
I'm not really one to swish it around or
Okay.
use it as mouthwash and like kick up debris from dinner. Like I'm not like I'm just trying to sip it a bit and taste it. But I do like the idea of, and maybe it's even why I got into whiskey. And it could really be any spirit that you can kind of just sit with and think about it, right? So I always say like if you care enough to go into like tasting notes, like, again, maybe you're like something, like Rich mentioned, like floral spice. And he might be thinking, like, okay, what have I had that kind of also has something similar? I think that's how a lot of like tasting notes come together. But I just like the idea of like taking a sip, kind of pausing, and it also just is nice room for conversation too, right? I always just I think it's best enjoyed with people, or if you're on your own like me watching a horror movie, or you guys like, just like a sip, kind of like make it intentional, and that way I don't need maybe 10 drinks in the night, but I've had like two or three, and
Hell yeah.
I have
made
to
the
learn
most out
that
of it.
technique because I do I do think I need the 10 drinks, and if you're telling me I don't need them and I can have the same enjoyment, then I need to work on that because
I am normally sitting around watching a horror film, drinking some bourbon, and I'm doing dumb things like toasting Art the Clown or something like that. And you don't get it, but I do.
especially when it's a movie where they're also drinking, I do tend to drink along, and I always
Oh
say
God,
that
that's the
I
worst.
don't think I've ever finished the movie Sinister because he's drinking scotch like
Oh
throughout the whole
God.
movie, and I have to drink scotch, and then I usually end up getting hammered by the middle of the movie, and I might have seen how it ends. I have no idea.
You need to make up drinking games. Like there was it Halloween Kills? And everyone's like, every time they say evil dies tonight, you should take a shot.
Mm.
That would make that movie bearable because that's a really hard one for me to get through. But yeah, no, that makes that drinking does make everything better. It really does. So I'm about ready to like pour another glass.
Yeah,
I don't know how
yeah,
you guys are, but like
yeah.
before we kind of
I
like
poured
before I
heavy.
get hammered, yeah, before I get hammered and forget what anything tastes like, let's talk about the other one we selected, which is
Yeah,
Woodford
okay.
Reserve, and that is another 45% alcohol, so another 90 proof bourbon. So yeah, Mike, tell us about this one before we kind of get into it.
Like I mentioned, so the makers was 70% corn. This one's 72, and it swaps out the winter wheat for rye. So it's 18% rye and then 10% malted barley. And this is where you get a little bit more of obviously a little bit more spice. People will often get like a little bit more dried fruits. Sometimes people say this is where you kind of even delve into a little bit more chocolate too. I'm gonna nose mine.
Yeah. I'm so different. Unbelievable.
I feel like even on the nose, it feels like
It feels alcohol forward. It's so
Yeah, it
much
doesn't.
different than the
It's not
makers.
sweet. When you sniff the
Yeah.
makers, it's very sweet. When you sniff this, it's like,
I'm getting something, but it's behind. Wait.
yeah, I get fruit and spice. I don't know, like, but definitely the spice is prominent.
yeah, I get gasoline, but
Yeah, it's so funny how I was getting like a sweet kind of scent from the makers, and this is it just feels so alcohol heavy. I'm having a hard time getting past that. And
So, Jerry, one thing we can talk about is because maybe like we said, you and I will get into some other bourbons that are higher proof, and a lot of times people get intimidated because they're like, oh, I'm having Maker's Private Select, and it's 56%, whereas the regular is 45%. What am I doing? This is insane. And Rich is like, I'm still gonna drink 10 of them, but I find that really, really good higher proof whiskeys or bourbons, the nose is actually less ethanol forward if it's good.
Got it. Okay.
Where like I come back to low, like some of the lower proof stuff, like, and when I'm nosing it like I am now, I feel like it's a little bit more grainy. It's a little bit more ethanol
Yeah, that's
forward.
exactly what I'm getting.
I am so happy you said grainy because I always describe things as tasting grainy. And I always say on
Yeah.
the show that I'm not sure that's the right way to describe it, but it's how I experience it. And you're confirming that that is a legit thing. So
That is it. And ethanol is not something I ever would have thought, but that's what I'm smelling right now. So that's
Yeah,
it.
so we'll take a sip.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it, man.
Cheers.
So different. Oh my God. So for me, I'm getting a bit of a berry kind of taste from this. I feel like a dark berry though, like a blackberry or something.
Yeah, like I said, for me, this is like a fruit and nut bar, if like is the best way to explain it. Like it's and I can see how then like this would be real how this becomes double oak. So Rich mentioned that he's a big fan of the double oak. So you can almost see that potential here. Like it's kind of light. There's like some of the chocolate, some of the dried berries, and that's why it kind of gets maybe amplified when you throw it in the secondary barrel finishing.
Yeah, I'm tasting this in a way that I never really tasted before. I don't think I've ever drank Woodford neat before.
But yeah, it's like I can't tell you the last time that like I sat down with this like to nose it and drink it. Like again, I mentioned that if I'm out at a concert, I'm looking at what they have bar selection. I'm 9 times out of 10 choosing Makers or Woodford. Those two are staples. But like to actually be sipping them, like yeah, like I laugh because when I go out to like events, everyone's like, "Yeah, he's Whiskey Morgue. Like, what are we gonna drink?" And I'm like, first of all, you guys probably drink more than me, but yeah, like I'm the same way. I'm like, yeah, throw it on ice, throw it with Coke. I don't give a shit. Like, the other stuff I do at home, that's kind of like for me to sit down and enjoy a pour, but I don't bring that highbrow shit to to a concert or if I'm out at a party or something. Just bring my own tasting glasses in the corner of the party.
So Mike, I don't know if you ever heard, but me and Rich have like a little trick we do whenever we have company over. So when people come to your home and they know that, you're a huge bourbon or whiskey fan, they always want to go, and what they want to do, they want to drink your most expensive bottle or your rarest bottle you had. Now, you don't have to tell us your secret on how you handle that, but I just want to know, do you have a method to handle that sort of company when they come by?
I do not, but I'll in lieu of that, I'll share a quick story of how this went sideways and was a complete disaster. So I had in my dining room, like, so this is like my outside like studio setup, but in my dining room I have everything on display, and like right now I'm upwards of like 300 bottles.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
I literally
it's
just
wild
like,
and
oh my God. Wow.
I felt good with 20, but not anymore.
I have these too. But
Jerry, my collection looked like yours maybe like 4 years ago. It was just in the last little while that it's gone crazy. But like, yeah, I was actually looking through my camera roll the other day and I had pictures and I was like, wait, was that my collection? I lived in a condo at the time and it kind of made sense. But I had like this like little IKEA bookshelf with like 20 bottles on there max. But yeah, now I have all these bottles. But anyway, so like I had some friends over and I'm typically the person to be like, um, I want someone to come by and be like, wow, like you have that bottle. I've always wanted to try it because everything I have is open. So I enjoy sharing. And so most of my guests, even if they're not huge whiskey guys, like they know enough that they can appreciate. But a few months back, my brother-in-law comes over and he like knows what I do, but he's not really too familiar with the bottles. And I had William LaRue Weller out. So secondary goes anywhere between like 1,000 2,000 US. I was fortunate I was able to buy it like at like MSRP in a lottery or whatever. And I turn around and he's going to people. He's like, "Who needs a drink? I'll pour you a drink." And he's just throwing heavy drinks
Oh my
in their
God.
glass. And I looked and like over like a third of the bottle was gone. And I was like, holy shit. Like if you went to a bar, like, you know, you're looking at $50, $60 a pour. This
Oh
guy was
yeah,
just doing
definitely.
doubles. He's like, hey, you need your Coke topped up? Like
Oh
this.
my God.
Oh, that's
Oh, nightmare fuel.
so two things there. So number one is Jerry, you got 4 years to get to 300 bottles. So
Yes, thank you. Good,
season
good to know.
six, season six. So we kick it off. I want to hear about it. And Jerry, you don't need to confirm that you do this as well. But for me, Mike, what I tend to do, because I do not like to share. If it is something I spent money on or really like, I don't want other people to experience it but me. So what I do is I have something much cheaper in the decanter, and when anyone asks to try something, I say, "Oh, you know what? I've already opened a bottle of that. It's right here.
Here.
I'm gonna pour it for the decanter," and they don't know that they're getting makers
that's
or
so
something
smart.
else.
That is so smart.
No one, they don't know. Like most people, like maybe you have some friends who are really into whiskey. Most of my friends have no clue what they're drinking. So if I tell them Makers is a $2,000, they're gonna be happy.
They're
And
happy.
it's like you said too. It's like if you tell me that this tastes like vanilla, now I taste vanilla. It's the same thing. I could say this is the most high end bourbon you ever had, and it's all mind tricks. So and
The
then
flip side, I think, is worse is that I get people come over and they're staring at 300 bottles of whiskey and they'll be like, wow, this is amazing. Do you have any vodka?
Oh, leave my house. Get out. Yeah, so I'm not gonna say if I do that or not, but I just want you to know if you come to my house, you're definitely drinking $1,000 bourbon out of my decanter.
The decanter makes it better. I don't know why, but the decanter makes it taste that much better.
Definitely.
This is super, super fun. And I appreciate you sharing all this knowledge. It definitely, I'm going to listen back to this a few more times and write down everything when I'm a little sober. But yeah, let's get into some horror talks. We'll get to know Mike a little bit better as we kind of go through this. But I do want to get to the horror portion of this show. But before we do that, Mike, before I forget, like anything you want to promote, how could people find you? Like we'll give you another opportunity at the end, but would love to kind of let people know early on in case they get too hammered and don't forget. So
I would say the to start, like the best place to see what I do is on Instagram. I feel like that's where I got my start, and it's an amalgamation of like everything right now. Because like later on at the end, I'll speak to like where you can find some other stuff. But you know, it all started off with the pairing a whiskey with a horror movie that I'm watching. And if you go on that page, you might see snippets of my podcast now, or you might see snippets of like other things. But like for the most part, it's still the foundation of pairing whiskey and horror, and that's what Whiskey Morgue is in its essence. So it's at Whiskey Morgue on Gmail. And yeah, it's probably the first place and the best place to find me.
So, Mike, I know you want to talk about, we always ask our guests what movies they would like to talk about. And you mentioned Nightmare on Elm Street 3, which I was super excited about because I have a lot of nostalgia for that movie. It's one I've probably seen it 30 times. And we'll get to that one in a minute. But I felt like if you're going to talk about part 3, you do need to talk about part 1. And we haven't really talked about Elm Street too much on the show before. So definitely excited about that because growing up, it was definitely a franchise that I fell in love with very early on in my horror journey. Again, now a lot of the sequels are kind of hard to watch because they're a bit goofy, but 12-year-old me like really got into even some of the later sequels like part 4 and part 5. But let's talk about the first one, the one that started it off, 1984, Wes Craven's Nightmare on Elm Street. Just in case anyone is brand new to horror and came here for the whiskey and they want to get a horror lesson, I'll give the plot really quick. So a bunch of teenagers are starting to have some very bad dreams involving a menacing figure with a burnt face and a glove with knives on it. And what ends up happening is the people, you die in your dream, you die in real life. And what the teens soon learn is that this killer that's stalking them in their dreams used to be a child murderer who their parents, once upon a time, burned alive because the justice system failed them, and now he's back for revenge. A few interesting things about this movie: it is Johnny Depp's first role, and which is really interesting when you watch it because he's really good in it, and it exposed a lot of the world to him. It also was a movie that was really difficult to make. So Wes Craven wrote the script, and it took him 3 years to get financing for it, which is wild when you think about how big this became. And even when they were getting ready to shoot it, it almost didn't happen because the money fell through, and one of the producers had to like max his credit cards to get funding to kind of get the movie off the ground. So it was one that like almost was never made, and yet spawned I don't know how many sequels. I think they made maybe 8 or 9 or 8 in a remake. I forget, but it became Freddy Krueger's a cult icon, and probably one of the most well known slashers in horror history. So again, I'm a huge fan of this movie. It was probably as a kid, it was one of the first movies that really scared me, just because it's creepy, and it's one that I watch now and it's still creepy. I love the way it's done, the score of it, the way it's lit, just the design of the world within the dreams. It just looks cool. And this is, a lot of people think of Freddy, and I'll shut up in a second that you guys talk, but people think of Freddy of this like wisecracking kind of goofy character. And back in this movie, and I would say this one and the second one, maybe even a little bit in the third one, he was not like this comic book character. He was kind of terrifying, especially in this one for sure. So I don't know. So Mike, I know you're a fan of the third one. Like, how do you feel about the original as well?
So yeah, when people ask me like my favorite, I think it really is the nostalgia of coming back to three. And it's funny because like I feel like one I've watched a million times too, but then when we were gonna do the podcast, I actually put it on the other night as I do and poured some whiskey. And it was exactly that. I was like, this is horrifying. And I saw it at way too young. Like my uncles, like I'm background's Portuguese and Italian, and they're wild. And so like they would be like, oh, the kids are hanging out in the basement. Put on a movie. Like I'm 7 and Nightmare on Elm Street's on. But like Freddy, like I like that you mentioned his portrayal because there's not many lines that come from him. The concept of like him being in your dreams, like when you're a kid, you're laying in bed, you're like, I'm so scared. Like the one solution is go under the sheets, go to sleep, and like none of that matters. And you're like, wait, the fatal flaw is going to sleep. And you're like, so you're like, what the hell?
You're
So
fucked.
yeah, and it's one of those movies I always say, part one is the reason, like even to this day, now I have a glass shower door, but when I had a curtain, I'd be peeing in the middle of the night and just pull back the curtain. And it was just something that from being young and watching those movies. And yeah, when you think of like number one, for me, I just think about like, how horrifying this idea is in the concept as a whole. But I didn't know the bit about Rich, like you mentioned with the budget, because I feel like what they did with some of the effects, and now that I know that it's on a tight budget, blows my mind even more. Because I just did a post not too long ago about Tina's death, or no, sorry, it was Glenn's death. But they actually used the same room, this like rotating room, and I'm sure you guys know about like the room that they built on like a on an axis that basically like they kind of shot it upside down. But yeah, like people were getting electrocuted.
Oh
They had like
man.
there was electronics and water sloshing around. That was like the fake blood. And whatever they could only do it once. So like I love the idea of like what you see on screen in a lot of these shots. That's what they had. They didn't have the money to redo it. Like they were like, hey, we're gonna put all our hope and faith into this effect or like this stunt, and whatever we catch on camera, we're gonna kind of roll with. And to think of like some of the iconic scenes that you get in the film is absolutely amazing.
Yeah, and I think I read that their special effects budget was like 60 grand or something like that, which again, if you inflate it, it's a little more today, but it's still not a lot of money. And just to set up some of the scenes you're talking about, this movie has some of the most iconic scenes ever, just stuff. And the first one you were talking about is when Tina gets killed, which is absolutely horrifying. And what happens is she has this dream, she's in bed with her lover, boyfriend, whatever you want to call him. And basically, Freddy's slashing her up, but also she's like levitating towards the ceiling and like just writhing around in pain as she's getting sliced up. And her boyfriend's at the floor, like not even understanding what's happening. And how you shot that is like you said, they kind of tilted the whole room, so like the room kind of spun, and she was actually on the floor, but it looked like the ceiling. And then the other scene is Glenn's death towards the end, where he gets sucked into the bed and a geyser of blood shoots out.
Volcano.
And I haven't seen this, but I was reading there's a deleted scene that actually after that happened. So in the scene that we see, a volcano of blood squirts out. The room gets covered in blood. It's slow mo. It's brutal. It's horrifying. Apparently, they shot where Johnny Depp's body comes back up through the bed that he was sucked into, and he's lifeless, and it sounds really creepy. But they ended up cutting that for whatever reason. Maybe it was too creepy, and they cut that out. And they used the same, like you said, same set where they kind of rotated the world. And the other big iconic scene, I think, is the bathtub scene where Nancy is in the bathtub and she's falling asleep, and there's that iconic scene of Freddy's glove coming between her legs, and it's like so overtly sexual but horrifying at the same time.
Yes.
And then he pulls her underwater, and like they're in this, I mean, they shot them like 100-gallon like tank or something like that. But it looks so effective, and it's so scary, and it stays with you. And the one more thing I'll say is talking about like these movies as a child and how it kind of like shapes you is I have a story. I don't know if I told this on the podcast before, but the very first time I saw this movie, I don't know how old I was. Maybe I was like 11, 10, whatever I was, but I was babysitting my younger sister. My mom was out at night and I was watching it on like a VHS tape. And at the time, my sister used to sleepwalk. And I'm watching that Elm Street. I have the lights off. I'm dark. I'm scared. And at one point, she just goes running right through the room. And like she was running towards the stairs, and I had to like jump
Oh
up
man.
and grab her before she got to the stairs. And I don't know if you've ever like woken up somebody who's sleepwalking, but the look of terror on her face, it scared the shit out of me. And it was like right in the middle of, I forget what scene, but it was a really scary scene in Elm Street, and I'll never forget it. But at the same time, it was exhilarating because like that's why you watch these movies, right? To
Yeah.
get scared. So Jerry, I know you're not like a huge fan of like the franchise in general. It's not really your thing, but how do you feel about this first one? Like, because it is very different than a lot of the other ones.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. And honestly, like kind of what I really remember from Nightmare on Elm Street when I was a very young person is a lot of young boys my age kind of made this Freddy person their entire character and their entire being. They would just come to school with their, red and green sweater and they'd wear
Probably
a
me.
hat and things like that. And I found that so funny because, I like the film, but I never thought of becoming the character. But that's how iconic, Fred Krueger is, and that it would actually kind of make you want to be the killer and kind of show up to like, elementary school dressed as like a killer. But I think you guys mentioned a lot of great scenes. A few scenes that kind of stick with me is it's that opening scene. It's that scene where he's like in that rundown boiler and there's like all those flames and it looks like it's like 105 degrees down there and he's building the glove and as a kid, like, oh my God, it was so terrifying because you're like, what was he doing? Why is he putting on that glove? And then you see how sinister this weapon is, and it's like nothing you ever saw because I probably watched like Friday and Halloween way before this. So you used to they're gonna grab a machete, they're gonna grab an axe, but the guy is like actually making a glove, something I could wear, put on my hand, and oh, that was so terrifying. So I mean, I really did get like that fear when I was younger watching that. Watching it now, I felt a little different because you see like Freddy's hands and you see him walking and you see his feet. And he kind of has like toddler hands and feet. I don't know why. He's like a size 6 men's and it's really not that scary because I feel like I could just push him down, and I guess as a kid he felt like so kind of like big and like, menacing, but seeing him now he's a small character, especially compared to like other like famous, slashers. Like he's compact and petite, I guess. But I mean,
And nimble.
yeah. So I mean that threw it off a little bit for me.
It's funny that you say that because actually I was reading too, and Kane Hodder actually auditioned for Freddy and did not get it. But I
Oh, I
actually
didn't know
think
that.
He's
I
bulky.
yeah, I think I like the fact that he is kind of small and skinny because he does kind of get his ass kicked a bit in a lot of these movies, right? So it almost makes it feel like people have a chance. However, like it's in your dream, he could do whatever he wants, right? So
Yeah.
he doesn't need to
Yeah.
be big and menacing to be terrifying, in my opinion. However, I do see what you're saying, but like, yeah, maybe you could kick his ass, but he's just gonna like do something else to get you. Yeah, yeah, you're fucked.
I know we're not talking about number four, but I love when Kincaid there is in the junkyard and he thinks he has Freddy and like Freddy will give you that like little bit of hope, right? Like I guess
You're gonna
in
make
like
it.
yeah, he always gives you a little bit of hope and then takes it away, right? But what's cool about I think yeah, he's not huge in stature and he's kind of like this like creepy little guy, but like I'm always like a less is more person. I love creepy moments. And when I watched it back this time, I was like, of course, like the real scene that like fucked me up from young was like when Tina in the body bag is being dragged
Oh
Oh
yeah.
yeah,
across the hall.
that's
Oh yeah.
And
terrifying.
it's
It's still
just
terrifying.
the hallway looks like so like sterile and it's just like very cold and it's like, and that idea, I think it's twofold. Like the first thing is that the imagery is horrible. Like watching that body get dragged and it's just like a trail of blood and Nancy's wondering what's going on. But in the franchise itself, and again, like it gets a little bit wonky after, but it's the idea of like, wait, am I dreaming? Am I awake? And Freddy toying with people, because I think that's what he does best, is this idea of like like essentially he could probably just pop out and kill you if he really wanted to. But there's an element of like really toying and messing with the victims, which we'll get into later, even more so when it comes to like the sequels and like part three.
Yeah, I'm glad you actually said that because it is like you are like, is this a dream? Is this real? And in the first one, the lines are very blurred where it's hard to tell. And one thing, even though I've seen this movie, I guarantee I've seen it 30 times, maybe more, because I definitely watch it more than once a year. I like never picked up on this till this last watch. And basically to kind of set up the end of the movie, and I apologize if I'm spoiling this for you, but I don't think it ruins your enjoyment of the movie at all. Nancy learns that if she grabs Freddy in the dream and wakes up at that exact moment, she could bring him into the real world where she has a chance to actually kill him as a human being, I guess. And she does this. She brings him out in the real world, kicks the shit out of him basically, and thinks she kills him, and then she does this thing in the end that I always kind of thought was a little silly, where she thinks if she turns her back on Freddy, he will just disappear, and which happens, and he does. But then you find out that like at the very end, like there's another nightmare where it's not over. And I always kind of thought that when she brings Freddy into the world, that really happens. But now that I watch it, I think the whole last 20 minutes of the movie are still a dream. And even though she's kind of getting the best of him, she doesn't, because like it is odd how like again at the very end like her mother, her friends, they're all back. It just there's no real cut where it's like she actually is awake. So I do think the whole last 20 minutes of the movie is him fucking with her, and I never noticed that before. I always thought it was like,
Interesting.
oh yeah, I think if you rewatch it again, like pay attention to that, because I always thought it was weird. I was like, this
Well,
is a
no,
weird way.
this makes sense because watching it back recently, I thought it felt disjointed, I guess is the best way to put it. But like you said, if we're gonna make a rationale for it, then that is this whole sequence where she thinks she defeats him, and that's why like she can just kind of turn her back and be like, I don't believe in you, and he just like disappears into stardust. And but then you realize that there's still this nightmare continuing.
Yeah, I think because that all was still part of the dream, and like maybe she didn't have this power to like bring him out like she thought. And one thing always thought was funny too, and it makes sense in the context of this still being a dream, is right before she kind of is going to go back into dreamland to pull Freddy out, she tells her dad, she's like, "Be back here in 20 minutes. I'm gonna get Freddy." And
Problematic right
she
there.
gives herself, it's either 20 or 15 minutes, but she gives herself 20 minutes to set all of these booby traps throughout the house that she's never done before, then fall asleep, then find Freddy in the dream, and then wake up. And like, it makes no sense. There's no, it
She
would
talks
take
to her
you,
mother too during
yeah,
that time.
yeah, she stops. There's no way you could do all that in 20 minutes. And
20,
it
it
would
has
make
to be a
sense that,
dream.
yeah, it was a
I'm
dream.
going
It
with
never really
you.
happened.
Yeah, because she drills into a light bulb and she makes a bomb. She makes an explosive, okay? And when she looks at her watch literally right before she goes to sleep, and she still has 10 minutes. So she
The
did
five
all of that.
minutes, yeah.
She set up like that sledgehammer. She set up that bomb. She drilled into a light bulb, spoke to her mother, got tired, lay down.
Listen,
Fell asleep.
I watched Home Alone. Like you can't do it that fast.
Exactly.
Yeah,
You need
and
like
he
a
was
good
an
two
expert.
hours. You need a 2 hour. I could tell it wasn't the first time he did it in Home Alone. It's definitely the first time that Nancy did it. And I think I was going to mention that was definitely like a problematic scene for me, Rich. But I actually like that you equated it to it might have been like some sort of dream sequence. And I do really want to go really quick back to like what Mike was talking about with that body bag drag scene. And I'm going to tell you really why I was terrified. And it really reminded me this time when I watched it. And it was the fact that Nancy, I mean, she went to school after her friend just died, which is insane. It's like her best friend.
Yeah.
And she's sitting in class, she's in school. It's daytime and she's in school. And as a kid, when you're young, you just feel like you're safe. Like when you're in
Mm.
those situations, nothing's going to happen to you. I understand the boogeyman is there when I go to bed. I understand he might come out at night, but I know he's not in my school. I know he's not out during daytime. And that just like fucks with you so bad to make you think like, I don't know where I'm safe anymore from this guy. Like, how hopeless do you feel when you're like, he could come to school, he could come during the day. Like I cannot escape him. And to me, that was probably like when I felt like this movie was just a little more in depth than like your standard slasher film, and that Freddy was really a formidable slasher that could kind of get you anywhere. You're not safe anywhere, and that was terrifying.
Yeah, as a, like, I typically say like Halloween is my favorite franchise and the original Halloween. But yeah, there's parameters, like you felt safe, like they're like school is safe, and then maybe in the evening you're scared someone's going to show up at your house type of thing. But like with Freddy, that's why in the essence of it, like you can't get any more scary than that. That like
Yeah,
everyone has to sleep.
yeah,
And,
And you can't
and
escape him. Like if you're at Crystal Lake and Jason's stalking you, you could just get in a car and leave,
just
right?
go.
You're
Yeah,
Michael Myers is killing your whole town. You could go. Freddy's gonna get you. At some point, you're gonna fall asleep, and maybe you wake up that time and you survive, but you're gonna fall asleep again. And like it's only a matter of time. And since they made the 8, 9 of these movies, like you see, it's only a matter of time before everybody gets it. Like nobody really walks away unscathed at some point. Maybe they survive, but they're done in the sequel. Like he's gonna
So
get
I,
you.
I actually had a little thing that what I found funny. I was talking to a friend of mine, and they were saying that like when Nancy's trying to stay up, I think it was when Nancy's trying to stay up, she's watching The Evil Dead, and I'm like, okay, I'm like, first of all, like, why, like, you're scared and you're trying to stay up, yeah, and
Why
then
would
you're
you
watching
watch a
Evil Dead,
terrifying movie that's going to give you
yeah.
nightmares?
Like I
Yeah.
really need to stay up. I'm scared of this
Yeah.
maniac killer. And then I found out it was like this like game between Raimi and Craven where they were kind of giving nods to each other in their films, which I thought was kind of cool. Because at first I was like, yeah, like this, like why the hell would she be watching? Like, I mean, cool, Evil Dead. I'm a fan, but like she wouldn't be watching this. But when you find out it's kind of like two directors and writers kind of like giving the nod to each other, I was like, okay, that's cool.
Yeah, I think like the Evil Dead one, there's like a poster of like Hills Have Eyes or something like that in the
Yeah.
basement. And then Craven did that. And then I think Raimi has the Freddy glove in part 2 of Evil Dead, something like that. So they did
Yeah.
go back and forth. Which, yeah, but it is funny because you think that like, why would, like, if you don't know that, you're like, why would she be watching this terrifying movie right before bed?
I can't tell you guys how many times late at night when I'm supposed to be sleeping and I'm just flipping through the channels that I've dreamt that Evil Dead was on TV and I could just watch that instead
Yeah,
of
she
watching
didn't have the
some shit.
DVD. that,
You know what
that
I'm
was
saying?
on public
I'm
broadcast.
just watching some garbage like on TV, and like I have dreams that I'm just flipping through like some public access channels, and all of a sudden there's like Evil Dead. But yeah, I was a little jealous of her for
So,
that.
so
But
Mike, how do you feel about the
Yeah.
remake they did in 2010 with Jackie Earl Haley as Freddy?
Yeah, when I first watched it, God, I guess I'm 37 now, so I don't know how old I was when I watched it, but I feel like I shut it down right away, and I still am not a fan of it. But when I look back at it, I feel like it shows me the potential of what maybe a remake could look like. Because when we go back to the core, like when you think about like they kind of allude to it that there was even more than just killing children, and I'm like,
Yeah.
it's pretty dark. And it's something that became fluffy later on, and when we get later into the franchise. So I think like the story is just there's so much you can do with it. So like I don't really like the remake, but it like I give the nod to a lot of like interesting things that they did with it, and I feel like it shows that there's potential to do an effective one in the future, maybe.
Yeah, I'm kind of split on it, right? It depends on the mood I'm in. Like, there's things I
Yeah.
definitely like about it. Like, I do think, and this might be controversial, but I do think Jackie Earl Haley plays Freddy really well. He's menacing and he delivers the lines and he's creepy. I hate how they did the makeup, though. I think the makeup
I
is
think it was the makeup
terrible.
that really threw people off because yeah, the
Yeah,
performance was great.
I like that they went back to the roots of him actually being a child molester, and that was in the original Elm Street script, but they changed it because they thought there was actually a series of um it was like a big molestation case in California that going on at the time, so they like didn't
Mm.
want to be seen as like capitalizing on that. Like I guess it was in the news at the time, so they kind of cut that out of the film. But and it's interesting too because like when they do these remakes and they redo a scene. So they redo the scene of Tina that we talked about earlier. And yeah, it's cool, but like it's interesting when you compare the two because the original was so much more effective. Like it just comes with like it was more gritty, I guess, than like this, which is more like
Yeah.
polished. And even as the Elm Streets go, like I rewatched most of them just for the hell of it for the podcast. And you see the first three and they're really gritty and dark. And then the fourth one it just has a different look. It's shot different. I don't know if the budget was higher, but it looks like a completely different movie and it loses that, again, like that creep, atmospheric, gritty factor. And I think that's what happened with this remake, I think they tried to make it for a wider audience and they tried to make it more modern, and they lost a lot of what was scary about it. But there are things about it I like. You know, it's not terrible. I'll still watch it. I probably watched it a bunch of times. But, you know, and I would say it's better than some of the sequels if I had to compare. But I mean, the original's so much better. It's not even close.
I think that's why it's important that like when we talked about three and one, like I just threw out three, and if you guys said like we're gonna do three and then something else, I would have been like, cool, like we could do another movie. But it really gets us to like reflect on the franchise, because I feel like, yeah, three is this pivotal point where, you know, and we'll get into it more later, but like it's more of like it starts teasing the punny jokes and Freddy becoming this animated character, but it's still really dark. Like, you know, a lot of those scenes are really super dark. But yeah, after three, when you get into four, five, and so forth, there's definitely a shift in how it's filmed and how it feels. So I think, you know, I also kind of, when I watched through them as well, I was like, I love number two, but you realize that like you could literally skip number two in the series and go one to three, and I guess because Craven's involvement again and whatnot. So yeah, I thought it was kind of like really nice how we just decided to go from one to three, because they could almost be like a direct sequel to the first one.
Yeah, number two is an interesting one. It's one that I never liked growing up, but I like it a little more now. It's a weird
Yeah,
movie. Like it's written very bizarre and it almost doesn't feel like a Elm Street movie. Like it doesn't really fit. It almost feels like it was something else and then they decided to like throw a Freddy character in. That doesn't mean it's bad
yeah,
or good. It's a bizarre movie. It's very dark, it's very creepy. The last 20 minutes of it like get really fucking weird. But
yeah,
yeah, it's one of those where it's like you got to be in the mood to watch it. But it doesn't fit. And yeah, I think one and three are very close in a lot of ways, even though three, they're definitely taking the character in a little bit of a different direction. One interesting thing is if you pay attention to like the timeline, I believe two and three are happening concurrently. Because I think they say two takes place 4 years after one, and I think three also takes place 4 years after one. So I think they're happening at the same time, or at least
interesting.
really close to it. Yeah, and you know what? One last thing that's interesting before we wrap this one up, every one of the Elm Streets pretty much has a different way to kill Freddy, all of which are dumb. Like they're never a good idea. It's always something like what? Like in this
Stupid.
one again, she like
Not
quote
appeal.
unquote turns her back on him and it's kind of silly. Or bringing him into the real world's kind of silly. Like I forget. I just watched the second one, but I was drunk and I forget
I
how
feel
it
like
ended.
they in every one they write a great movie, and they're like, okay, what do we do with this at the end? And like this time, this is how you kill Freddy, and then next time it's another thing. And I guess like, you know, maybe that's why you can keep running with it and make, you know, 100 sequels, because the rules are very loose.
Yeah, you could just I mean you could just sedate him for a little bit and then
Yeah.
you hope you die of natural causes before he awakens. All right, cool. So let's wrap this one up. So for those of you who are tuning in for the first time, I'm sure we have a lot of Whiskey Morgue fans that have never heard of us that are checking this out, hopefully. What we do with these movies is we rate them on a scale of 0 to 5 bloody knives, 0 being the worst, 5 being the best movie you've seen in a while. And how it works here, we play a little drinking game on this show. And the number of bloody knives I give a movie is the number of sips Jerry needs to drink, and vice versa. When we have a guest on here, we kind of do things a little different. And what we do is, Mike, you need to pick which one of us you want to drink with for the rest of the night. And what that means is if you pick me, then you have to drink whatever Jerry says. And if you pick Jerry, you have to drink whatever I say. And then both Jerry and I need to drink what you say. I know that's a little complicated, but we'll figure it out
Yeah,
as we
no, I get
go.
We'll walk you through it.
So
Every time we say something,
as long
just
as I'm
drink.
drinking.
Just
yeah,
drink.
yeah. I'm already confused, and I've done this probably 27 times at this point. So Mike, let's let you go first. What do you rate the first Nightmare on Elm Street, 0 to 5 bloody knives, and you could do halves. And just before you say that, just so you know, I have switched to ice. I'm still drinking Makers, but because
Okay.
the drinking is about to accelerate,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Turn it up a notch.
I am cooling it off. So Mike, what do you get this one?
I'm gonna go 4.5 knives. Only because I want to give it five, just because of I think how important of a film it is. I'm a huge Wes Craven fan in terms of like how it changed the landscape of horror. I can go off for hours about him and himself, but like I'm giving the half off just because some of the plot holes or like certain things that, but again, it's budget, so I respect that. Yeah, so like I feel like, you know, like childhood me wants to be like 5 knives for sure, but like being a little bit more critical, I'm gonna say it's still nearly there. But I'm gonna go like 4.5, just with like some room for error.
All right, we're gonna
Yeah,
drink
it
to
sounds
that.
good to me.
Cheers,
Let's
four
do
and a half
that
seconds
for
for us. Mike, you don't need to drink, but feel free to.
I will drink anyway.
All right, Mike.
Oh
Moment of
man,
truth.
that was long.
Moment of truth. Who do you want to partner up with tonight? Are you going to be drinking with me or Jerry?
I'm drinking with you,
That's
and
probably the
it's
right
because
choice.
I feel like you're a big fan of the franchise, and I feel like drinking a little bit more. Jerry might get a little too critical, and I want a few more knives and a few more drinks. So
Oh, okay. So I'm sorry. So if you want to drink more, my recommendation would be to side with Jerry because this is just me guessing. I think I'm
yeah,
probably going to give a higher rating than him, so he's going to be drinking more than me. I might be wrong. But
okay.
if you want the most sips, that's probably the way to go.
Well,
However,
because if
enter at
you
your own
rate
risk.
higher, okay, I see
Yeah.
then I'm going. Okay, I'm
All
Team
right,
Jerry.
so I guess I'll go next since we're talking about me, like I'm not here. Talking right here, guys.
I turned your video off. I'm not even seeing you right now.
Fuck that. Turn my mic off next too. It makes no difference. I like the film. I watch it. A lot of times I watch it because honestly my wife likes it. That's probably
Johnny
and it's
Depp.
something yeah, it's something we can watch together, and there's probably like 5 horror films that we can watch together. So it is something that I will watch with her. And that's probably the reason why I watch it. And I watched it this time with her as well, and she enjoyed it.
Nice.
So if she was here, she would probably give it a 5. But Jerry,
Luckily, she's not because I don't want to drink 5.
yeah, Jerry's gonna give it a 3. It's an important piece. It's a part of the horror canon. It's Wes Craven. It's an iconic character. A lot of problems in it for me. Find a lot of things annoying. I didn't get into it, but I didn't want to knock the movie. But it's a 3. It's okay. I could watch it anytime. Someone puts it on, I'm not mad.
Okay, so I'm gonna like sip while you sip. That way, we're not just drinking separately like a bunch of hobos. So I'm gonna give my rating now, and I actually am going to give it a 5 because to
You're a
me it
dick.
is. Yeah, I know. This might only be the second 5 I've ever given. I've given 2 5. I gave Midsummer, and I think I gave Terrifier a 3 or 5. I'm giving this a 5 also. Now that I figured out that the whole last 20 minutes is a dream, the one big flaw I had is gone. The only flaw I have with this movie is some of the acting is a little, especially the mother character and Tina's boyfriend. However, it's a horror movie. I'm
Rod.
not. That doesn't upset me too much. So I'm giving it a 5. So okay, so Mike and Jerry, you're going to drink 5. I'm going to drink 3, and let's cheers to that.
Here you go. Cheers. Big sip, sir.
So glad I switched to ice.
Yeah. I switched to ice as well. And look, guys, I'm really glad that we're talking about these films, and I'm glad we're talking about the character. I know we mentioned her a few times. Her name was Tina, and she had that iconic kill in this film. And one of the most annoying things that I found in this film is I think they said Tina 100 times in this movie, and it really got annoying to me. Like I felt like everyone, like Rod was yelling Tina, Glenn was yelling Tina, Nancy, everyone's yelling
That's
Tina.
the new drinking game.
Yeah, Tina. So I'm glad you mentioned that, Mike. That's exciting. So what I started thinking about is slashers, for some reason, always seem to have a Tina character in it. And I did
Oh,
some research, and it's actually rampant. So I put together a little drinking game, Mike. And if you're down to play, it's going to be a little bit of a trivia question, and it's going to be really easy. And the name of this drinking game is Was There a Tina? And I'm
okay.
going to give you a horror film, and you just have to say yes or no. And if
Okay.
you're right, I'm going to sip. But if you're wrong, you have to take a sip. And we're going
Shit.
to let Rich decide who he wants to pair up. And I already know the answer to this because I notoriously do very bad in these games because I think they're so clever, but they end up being very easy and everyone
So
figures
there's
it out.
actually a Tina character.
Yeah, someone named Tina. Yeah, not a
Oh,
real
okay,
life
okay.
actor,
Oh,
a
okay,
Tina
okay, okay. Yeah,
character,
yeah.
just a Tina character in the film. And that's it. I mean, if you don't know, it's just a 50-50 guess. It's either yes or no. So my first question is, are you down to play?
Absolutely. Let's do this.
Awesome. Rich, who you pairing with?
I'm gonna pair with our guest. I'm pairing with Mike.
All right, let's do
Yeah.
it. So let's get into Was There a Tina? So I'm just going to name a movie and you just tell me if there was a Tina in it. Are you ready?
Sure.
All right. Halloween 5.
I should know this. I'm gonna say yeah.
Yeah, there is. God damn you. So I drink.
Okay.
So it's Tina Shepard, and yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. I'm starting off bad. The Funhouse.
Oh shit! I just did a thing on the Funhouse.
Fuck me.
No, but I should know that off the bat. Like, okay, I'm gonna say no just because I
God
wrote and I
damn
remember
it.
writing Tina.
This is going downhill already.
Jerry, always listen to our guest podcasts before you do the drinking game.
I do. I can't listen to every single episode. I have a job. Listen, until makers start sending those checks, I have a job. So I don't know who we need to talk to, who your friend was over there, but they need to send these checks in quicker so I can quit. All right, ready? Cutting class.
Oh man, this is like just 50-50. I'm gonna say yeah.
All right, so it's no, you got one wrong. You guys finally get the drink. Okay. All right, thank God. Oh my Lord.
Cutting Class starring Brad Pitt, who did audition for Johnny Depp's role in Nightmare on Elm Street, believe it or not.
I heard he auditioned. I didn't know about the Kane Hodder though. I didn't.
Interesting.
Yeah, it would have been an interesting choice if they went with Kane Hodder, right?
Yeah.
I actually didn't know Kane Hodder was kind of around even back then.
Same.
And there is like a big connection with Elm Street and Friday the 13th because I think it's Sean Cunningham worked with Craven, and I believe Craven helped out on some of the original Friday the 13th, and Sean helped out on some of Nightmare on Elm Street, like shot like some of the scenes where they're doing second unit stuff. So
That makes the Freddy vs. Jason even more of a poetic movie. That's cool. I watched that the other night too. I went like you guys mentioned this, and like I was like with Rich here, I just went overboard. I'm like, I'm gonna watch all of them. I could have just watched 1 and 3 and brushed up, and I just went hardcore and started watching the whole franchise.
Same.
Fuck it.
My wife said,
All
"Can you
right.
spend time with me?" I'm like,
Important stuff. I gotta take notes. All right, let's keep going here. All right, so what was the last one? Cutting class, right? All right, so
cutting
ready?
class.
My Bloody Valentine, since Valentine's Day just passed.
Yes, there is a Tina.
There's no Tina
No?
in that.
Damn, you were so confident with that one.
That was
I
it.
know, because I just wrote on that one too, like the Canadian. It's a Canadian classic, man. Like
That's
shit.
it. No, and I triple checked all these, so I can't get called out by some disgruntled
No.
viewer sending me hate
No.
mail later on. So it happens. It's like, Jerry, you're such a dick. I know. All right, ready?
Thank you. Yeah.
Popcorn.
I'm kind of certain on this one too. I'm gonna go say yes for popcorn.
Oh, yeah, you're right. You're
Yeah.
right.
Wow. I've only seen that once. I saw it in the theaters when it came out when I was a kid, and I haven't seen it since. So I remember nothing about that movie.
What's funny, it's crazy. Like when I listen to this, I feel like almost like the other night I searched for popcorn on like Roku. I was just trying to see where it is. I didn't end up watching it, but I told myself I wanted to revisit it because I haven't watched it in years. So it's like Jerry throwing out these titles.
Yeah,
I'm like,
I watched
man,
it
dude.
last year. It's a little slow. I remember that. It's a little slow. It's not as exciting as maybe I remember. All right, so we got a couple more here. Here's one of my favorites. Yeah, this is top film for me. Slumber Party Massacre. I do like it.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah. Off the bat, but I just feel like a part of the entourage of chicks there. I feel like a Tina would be fitting. I'm gonna say yes.
So that's a no.
Shit.
I would have
Guys
said
got a
yes to that
drink.
too. How did they not have a
Right.
Tina? You mean in that 20 girl shower scene, there was not one Tina in that?
That's exactly why I'm just like there has to be a Tina somewhere in there.
You would think, but again, triple checked it. So, Rich, I'm glad you said what you would have said because we're going to find out right now what you would have said. So, I have a couple for you. I have a couple for you, Rich, and we're just going to flip the team. So, I'll still say solo. I'll stay solo, and you guys stay a team, and it's the same exact rules. Rich, if you get it right, I'll drink, but if you get it wrong, you and Mike drink, okay?
All right, we got this. Let's do it.
All right. So, all right.
Let me get IMDb up really quick.
Yeah, it's good. There's no way you can type it in quick enough because I'm coming at you real quick. Friday 13th, part 4.
Yes.
Yes, there is a Tina. She's the twin.
Yep. That I knew.
All right. Well, what about Friday 13th, part 5?
That I don't know. You know what? I'm going to say yes.
Fuck you, dude. How'd you get that?
Because why not? Fuck it.
So Tina's the one that gets naked in the woods.
Oh, okay. I know. I don't know her name, but I know who that is.
Rich is like, okay, yeah.
All right. I'm throwing you a softball right now, so let's see how you do. Evil Dead 2.
Yes.
No.
Oh shit. Okay.
Man, I thought that was a softball. There's only like 3
I'll
women.
be honest. I don't remember Evil Dead 2 very much. I haven't seen it that in a long time.
All right. Well, when was the last time you watched Tourist Trap? Because that's the next one.
Never. Never. I've never seen it. I'm going to say, let's see, with 2 guesses. I'm going to say yes.
Yes,
All
you're
right.
correct.
50
All right.
50 guess.
So here we go. We're at the last one, and Mike, what we like to do is we like to put a little bet on this one to kind of see how everyone's feeling. So Rich is going to have the ability right now, and you can back out if you want. You don't look like the type of person to back out to me, but so you could participate. But Rich could bet up to 3 sips right now on this last guess of whether or not he's going to get it wrong or right. So first question is, Rich, do you want to make a bet?
I do. Let's do triple.
All right, what is it?
Triple or nothing. Let's do it because I've done pretty
3.
well so
So
far.
this is
Yeah.
this is 3. Okay, so you should know this because we went over this film ad nauseum in the podcast and in life for the last 20 years.
You say Friday 13th Part 2.
No, it's not. You're right. It is a part 2, but it's Sleepaway Camp Part 2.
There has to be a Tina. Yeah, there's got to be. Yeah, definitely. Yes, there's a Tina in that movie.
So the answer is no.
Yeah, how is there not a Tina? There's 18 women in that
Because
movie.
they're all named after the celebrities, remember?
Yeah, but wasn't there? Fuck.
Oh, finally I won. Thank
Okay,
God.
wait. Before you go celebrating too much, I do have a drinking game. It's a really quick one.
No way. We just did a drinking game. We just did a drinking game.
Over under for 3 sips in the original Nightmare on Elm Street. If you get it right, I will drink the 3 sips. If you get it wrong, you drink the 3 sips.
Who's this question to? Me or Mike?
Both of you. Both of you.
Okay.
You can both answer separately. In Nightmare on Elm Street, over or under, they say Tina 35 times. Do they say it more or less than 35 times?
Mike, I'm gonna go over because I feel like they said
I'm gonna go less just because I feel like it seems like more, but it's not as much as we think. I'm just gonna go less.
Okay, so you're less, Jerry, you're over. 39 times. Shit. They say it. So Mike and I need to drink the 3 sips. Cheers.
Wow. It felt like 139 times.
39 times.
So did you Google that or AI that? What'd you do?
It's on IMDb, actually.
Oh, IMDb. Okay. I was just guessing because it just kept resonating with me.
It's funny. I made a note about that to talk about, and I'm glad you brought up the drinking game because they do say it a lot. I'm like, how many? Oh, they do say it 39. So there you go. Cool. All right. Well, that's Jerry's Tina drinking game. That was definitely a blast. I'm definitely hammered now, and unfortunately,
this podcast's not over. We're done.
we do have. Well, normally I would end this because I'm exhausted now, but we did say we're going to talk about part 3, so let's talk about part 3. I'll give the plot of it really quick. Basically what happens is 4 years after the events of the original Nightmare on Elm Street, Freddy is targeting a new group of kids who are in an insane asylum because they are having sleep problems. Nancy has now gone to college and is a, I guess, psychology expert, although she gets hired as an intern at this hospital where she works with these kids to help them fight Freddy. This has a much higher kill count than the original Nightmare on Elm Street. It is a little bit different because this is where you see Freddy start to be that wisecrack. However, his wisecracks are very sinister, and I don't think there's really anything goofy or silly about this movie. And again, you watch it as an adult and some of it's a little, I wouldn't say hokey because I don't think it's hokey, but it does hit different. But when I watched this as like a 12-year-old boy, like I thought this was the fucking shit and it was terrifying. And there are still some really scary scenes in this movie. Again, the way they portray. So, like, one of the main actresses, I can't think of her name right now. She's played by Patricia Arquette. She's Tina,
Kristen.
Right?
Kristen.
Kristen. She goes in her dreams. She goes back to Nancy's house. Only now it's abandoned and all fucked up. And the scenes of her in Nancy's house are creepy as fuck. The set design is really wild. It's so dark and the way they lit it, it's just so creepy. And I think in this movie, the dreams are really more detailed and there's like a lot of stuff going on, but it all works for me. And one thing I love about this movie, that when we talk about Freddy giving people false hope, the people in the institution kind of learn that in their dreams, they can kind of take control, and like they don't have to be the weak person they are, and they can kind of fight back against Freddy. However, as strong as they think they are, they just can't really fuck with Freddy, who overcomes them pretty much one by one. So Mike, you picked this movie. I think we touched on early on of why you picked it, but kind of would love to know kind of like your favorite parts of this movie, like what you really love about it, why you're still watching it, almost 40 years later, right? Because it was 1987. My math is not so good. But yeah, 40 years later, we're still watching it.
Yeah, I mean, it comes back like the nostalgia element is important because I feel like I mentioned like family get-togethers and like me and my cousins, it would be in the basement watching these films. And I think three, for what it meant back then, three was like, you know what, we're gonna band together, and if you kind of like team up, you can defeat Freddy. And I love that idea of like, it's like this comic book element that like we can all kind of harness our superpowers and take on Freddy Krueger. And again, with this idea of like hope, um, revisiting it, being a bit older, a little bit older, um, I realize still how dark it is and how like this is like Freddy at his finest, like preying on like your weaknesses, your vulnerability. So as much as they're trying to harness their superpowers, he's like, oh, like you had an addiction, like my gloves is now fucking needles. Like that's so dark. Like,
Yeah.
so for me, it's like, yeah, like there's these ad libs that I love. There's these like punchlines, and we see a tease of like where Freddy's going to head in future sequels. But I feel like it's still really dark, and the fact that like all these kids or teens are in the psychiatric ward is already kind of very bleak to begin with, and they're all trying to like figure out their shit, and they're all looking for help, and they you know they start connecting over these dreams. There's a much greater appreciation for the film. Like I already thought I loved it because of the nostalgia. I guess to kind of make it short, I loved it because of the nostalgia, but there's a greater appreciation watching it now, and revisiting it with like a little bit more like maturity and kind of seeing how still very dark it is. And then we get Freddy's backstory too, which is, speaking of dark, like kind of just adds to the lore of Freddy and maybe why he was the way he was.
Yeah, so I would say that like I think the first one is the best one of the franchise. I think this one though is still my favorite of the franchise. And it's probably the one
Wow.
I watch the most. And again, part of it is the nostalgia. I do really like the creativity of it. I think it's very different. I'm not saying this is the reason why it's my favorite, but this is the only one I believe that has nudity in it. That could
Yeah.
be part of the
That's
reason why it's
like
my
3 seconds.
favorite.
Yeah.
Hey, you take what you could take.
Take it.
No, no,
When
but
you're
this
12, fuck it.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
it.
No, but and I used to watch this one all the time. But yeah, no, I just love this movie. I think it's just super cool. Again, it's very flawed. I think there's a lot of like really interesting writing choices that I think are just weird. The fact that Nancy comes into this like psychiatric hospital as an intern, and yet the doctor who's in charge of the patients like listens to her, and like she's like, oh, we should prescribe them this experimental drug that we know nothing about, and the guy's like, sure,
Yeah.
like even though you're just an intern, like I'm gonna listen to you and risk my whole career, like it gets a little ridiculous the way
And
they
Lawrence
kill.
Fishburne's like, sure, yeah,
Yeah.
I'll
Oh,
do
that's
it.
right. Lawrence Fishburne's in this, which is super cool. But yeah, it's like it's so silly. Like the way they kind of kill Freddy is kind of like silly. Like, they basically bury his bones and throw holy water on the
It's
bones
dumb.
and throw a cross on him. And that's kind of stupid. But like again, like foregoing all of that, like it doesn't take away from my enjoyment of this movie. I still really like it. The dream kills are really creative. Like the one where the kid's in bed who's like a puppet maker, and Freddy kind of, pulls out his veins and uses him as like a
It's
marionette is
brutal.
super sick. I love that there's a lot of it's mostly practical effects, so it's puppetry, and
Mm.
it's and it still looks
Stop
really
motion
good.
there.
Stop motion, and I think it's because like the way they lit it, the way they shot it, like it still looks really good. And it makes you see this movie and then you compare it to like the remake, and even like how movies are now, like the movie, it hits different because it's very, I don't know, it just looks cool. I'm a big fan of it.
Well, I'm gonna blow some minds right now because I'm gonna be honest with you guys. When I started watching this film for the podcast, I realized I never fucking watched it before. I never seen it before until
I'm not
three
shocked
nights
though, because you
ago.
don't really like these movies. So like I'm shocked that you never. I mean, I'm not shocked.
So I have watched many in this franchise. I always confuse this one with that one that I can't stand, and I don't even know which one it is, but it's where they repeat the same scene like six
The
times
fourth
in
one.
a
It's the
row.
fourth one.
Is that the
Fourth,
fourth one?
yeah.
Yeah, it's
So
the
for
fourth
some
one.
reason, I always thought that that was this one, and I might have skipped it. So when I
It
actually
bleeds it
watched
bleeds
this,
into it a bit, which because even like with Kincaid's scene, I was like, wait, like he doesn't die, and so he survives,
mm,
and then in
makes
four
sense.
is the
Okay.
junkyard. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and so there was some confusion. And speaking of like that kind of puppeteering kind of scene, like my wife was talking about it because she's seen this one 10 times. And she's like, "Oh, I don't want to see this right now." I'm like, "See what? What's gonna happen?" I realized I never saw it before. And I thought it was interesting, definitely Patricia Arquette and Lawrence Fishburne playing some C character and it was like the show like where he came from is really interesting. What I found the best about this film was, and you guys both touched on it, was the dream sequences. I thought they were so well done, and I really thought that's a lot where the horror came in for this film. It was so much different from the first one, so much different from the second one. Like I feel like they within the first 15, 20 minutes of this film, they put in so much special effects. You're like in for a ride. There was puppeteering, animatronics, stop motion, um, every single thing. There's like that giant Freddy kind of puppet. I mean, there's all these crazy things.
The
The
worm, you mean,
room
right?
falling
The
apart. Yeah. Yeah, it's like that worm thing. It was just,
yeah.
it was sick. And it was it was scary,
Hot
because
Freddy nurses.
yeah, I mean, there was so many things to it, and the kills were really, really brutal in this one, with the veins coming out. And Mike, I think you mentioned with like all of a sudden the glove turned into like hypodermic needles to kill Taryn. Oh, in the spiked wheelchair.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, this is like some sick stuff. And I was like,
Yeah.
I really thought that this series went off the rails at this point, but I was wrong. It was the next one. So, through no fault of my own, I really slept on this one, and I'm happy that you brought this up and I was able to watch it because it was definitely a nice entry into this series, and there were a lot of things to like. But big but here, this film suffers the same problem that Hellraiser suffers from. There's not enough Freddy. There really wasn't. I don't like what did he I don't know what the runtime is. Rich could probably check it right now, but if the guy had 10 minutes, I would be shocked. It just wasn't enough Freddy for me.
I don't know if I agree with that, and maybe I just never really thought about it. I never, and maybe he is in it just in short bursts because the dreams where you know what? Maybe you're
But not
right. Like
him. There's 20 minutes of B character building and subplot building, but it's not action orientated or Freddy in those scenes. So it's just there's a lot of Ishtar in this film for
It kind of
like
reminds me of
10
like
to 15
Beetlejuice
minutes
then maybe
parts.
because like in my mind Freddy was in the film quite a bit, but but like now that you mention it, if I really counted like how long he's on screen,
Hmm.
it was like in Beetlejuice he was on like Michael Keaton was on screen for like 12 minutes.
Not
but
enough, not
it's all you think
enough.
Yeah,
about
Like
it.
that's what you want to see. You're waiting to see, Beetlejuice. You're waiting to see
yeah.
Freddy. And I was like, where the hell is he? Why are we talking about these characters? Why are we getting all the backstory on these characters that are killer bait? They're
And then what
basically
it is
there
that
for
when he does show up in that like 30 seconds, I find it is an
oh,
epic,
sick.
like
Sick.
an epic scene. Yeah, but it's like maybe in your mind it's in imprinted more because like they stick with you. Like
Yeah.
when I think of this movie, I literally just think of a highlight reel of him preying on each of their weaknesses and like the in each like death scene, and those stand out. So maybe it just seems like a lot more when I kind of like just think of the film as a whole in my mind.
I mean, they're in that junkyard a long time. They were in that bar a long time.
I guess you're right. It doesn't bother me though, and I think look, there is there's plot development. You kind of zone out for some of that, but I do think the dream sequences are kind of some of them, especially early on, are a bit long until he gets there, and I kind of like it. Like the opening dream sequence with Kristen, like where she's going through the house and she's like holding like a child and it becomes like a skeleton. You're right, Freddy. I don't even know if Freddy even pops up until like the last second of the dream, but the whole thing is creepy to me. Like it just
Yeah, I think comes back to what I said about earlier about me loving that like when Freddy's lurking, like it's like with I know we're not talking about Halloween, but I love Halloween because it's like is he around? Is like where is he? Like I'm very much like less is more approach in films. So like the idea of like the girl on the tricycle and I forget what she fucking says, like he's home or whatever. I'm like, fuck, that's so creepy. First of all, kids on
Yeah.
tricycles, like
Like
you
this is
learn from
where
The
he
Shining.
takes us or
Yeah,
something. Like
Yeah.
yeah. But I just yeah, it's like throwing you back into the house. It, a lot of that is what's creepy. Like you show me those girls doing like jump rope outside. I'm like,
Yeah,
fuck,
yeah,
here we
yeah.
go.
It's scary as
Like
fuck. Yeah.
it's almost like I don't want them on screen too much because, and maybe because I'm like, I don't, I'm not a fan of like where it went later on because I love like Punchline Freddy. But like I still want that creepy element that like, oh shit, he's around. He's just messing with you. But yeah, but no, but it's still, I think, a very interesting takeaway that like, yeah, if we can get the runtime of how long he's actually on screen, because yeah, he like when I think of actual acting, like yeah, he's not really there. He's there, but not so much.
So you guys are getting a little different view from me here. You both are like fans, and for me looking in, I want to see him, and I want
Yeah,
to see like the action surrounding him. And when he's not there, I notice it. And I think that's
yeah,
probably the different. You guys are getting more into like the lore and the story and the atmosphere that these films are creating, and I'm like, where the fuck is Freddy? So it's just a little different for me. That's all.
yeah, and I get why you have that opinion. I bet I don't know if he's in it more or less than he is in like the first one. Like he's probably barely in
Definitely,
that one too.
definitely
If you
more
think
the
about
first one. Oh,
and like I understand your point on Hellraiser because like I really actually like Hellraiser, but I do wish there was more of the Cenobites. They are barely in the movie. But I mean, look at like Halloween. Like how much is Michael Myers on the screen? Like
I think he
probably
is.
not.
I think a
Maybe
lot
I'm
more
wrong.
than
Maybe I'm
Freddy.
wrong.
well, it's
But
mentioned Hellraiser. I don't want to like go on a tangent, but like I love Hellraiser, but it's that same reason where I'm like I always say I don't know how. I mean, maybe it was with the franchise and the sequels later,
the
where
sequels
like
are all
Pinhead,
awful. But
because like,
yeah,
yeah, but
except
that
for the
must have
second one.
that must have been what propelled Pinhead into who he is. Because I'm like, if you look at the first one, like he kind of just shows up at the end. And I love the film, don't get me wrong,
Yeah, yeah,
but
same.
he's not a central like to put him on like the Mount Rush Slashmore of characters. I was like, well, in the first one, he kind of just shows up at the end, and I dig it, and like maybe I would be even more curious to see more of that. But yeah, in the first one, I was like, yeah, it's I love the plot. I'm Team Frank, and but like but
It's a
like
weird
yeah,
team
but
to be
like
on.
yeah.
But yeah, I get it. You wanted more Freddy. I think it's the right amount, and maybe a little more would have been better. Maybe it would have hurt the movie. But yeah, I do like kind of the build up of it. I do like some of the dream sequences without him. Look, I think the plot does get a little kind of tricky at some point. Like it is a little silly, but I also like getting to know the characters a bit because, and the reason being, I know they're kill bait, but the dreams that Freddy kills them in are based on their personalities. So I think if you don't really know their personalities a little
Okay, I'll
bit,
give you that.
those dreams don't hit as hard. Like it just wouldn't be the same like that. So I think they're setting it up for that final piece of it. But I could see like, being it might be drag for you, but for me, I'm kind of like getting into it because I'm like, oh, how's Freddy going to use this to get this person at some point? So I'm ready to kind of start rating this one. And so
Really, I
again,
was
just
ready to
the
drink more.
well, we are. You're about to
Oh,
drink
oh
more
shit.
You might,
when I
yeah, it
get
might be, yeah.
yeah when I give this one a
Yeah.
really high rating. So again, Mike, you're with Jerry. Unfortunately, so I am going to give this one a 4.5. Again, it is
What?
very look,
This
it's
is a
very
four and a
flawed.
half. This is a four
For
and a
me, for me,
half.
for me, it is, and the reason why is because like I've watched it so many times. I watch it all the time, and I still love it every time I watch it. And again, are there things that could be better? A ton. But none of the flaws in it take away from my enjoyment of the movie. Whereas some other movies, the flaws kind of kill it for me. But this one, I could overlook a lot. So I'm giving it a 4.5. Jerry, so we could all drink together. What do you give this one?
Um, it was okay. I'm sorry, guys.
No, I didn't
Mike,
think you would like it, to be honest with you.
I know this hit your core memories. I know it's hitting Rich in his core memories as a young man growing up with a sleepwalking sister terrifying him every night in his dreams. It did not hit me the same way. It is the first time I watched it. It's 2025. Again, you can send me that hate mail and tell me like I'm a poser or whatever you want, It's okay. I get it. It's okay. I wanted it was brutal, but I just wanted more Freddy, and I there were really long stretches, maybe 15, 20-minute stretches where I got bored and really zoned out. So I'm giving this one a 2.
That's fair. Look, that's fair. So,
Yeah.
Mike and Jerry got to drink 4.5. I'm just gonna sip on my two, and I'm gonna enjoy this.
I'm
So
scared what
cheers.
Mike's gonna give it.
Oh, we're gonna end this before he has a chance. Don't worry. And that's it,
Yeah,
guys. All right,
seriously.
everybody,
I have a really bad feeling.
No,
like,
no, okay.
like he chose this film, so I have a really bad feeling what's about to happen right now.
Yeah. So Mike, what are your thoughts? What do you give this one?
I'm gonna cop out and do the same 4.5. It's it's core memories. It's, I feel like, pinnacle in the franchise, whether you like what happened after or before. I feel like it's just that perfect middle ground, being three. It has the punchlines like welcome the primetime bitch, like, but also it's just super fucking dark, and his backstory. So yeah, like, again, are there things I can pick at it for sure, but for me it's like just one of those memorable films that, like, yeah, I think I enjoy it all the time. And if I'm gonna make a quick tie to whiskey, I feel like you can say this whiskey's $1,000, and this whiskey is supposed to be like raved by all whiskey critics. But if you fucking enjoy a whiskey and it makes you feel good every time you drink, then that's like, 4.5, 5 knives out of 5 whiskey for you. You know what I mean? That's why you enjoy it. And I think, like, that's the key thing. The same thing with, like, what Rich was saying, like, no matter what, I watch it and I'm like, shit, I enjoy that just as much, and maybe with even different reasons, but like, it's just been too consistent over the years, from like childhood to now.
Yeah, and I'm gonna watch it the rest of my life, right? So, and just one last thing
Yeah.
before we wrap this one up. I think you said it earlier, Mike, but just wanted to say it again. I believe a lot of the one-liners are ad-libbed by Robert Englund, which is super cool.
Yeah.
And I know the primetime bitch, and he says the other one, like, this is your big break in TV. And apparently they were on 2 different takes because they just said, just say whatever comes to mind. And they liked both of them so much, they kept both of them in, which I thought was like an interesting thing. And that's the scene where Freddy basically puts a girl's head through a TV, which is super, super fun.
I like that part. I did like that.
So, all right, so let's cheers. Jerry and I are going to drink 4.5 to close this one out.
Ooh, cheers. Get that ASMR.
Mike's
Get right
drinking
now,
with
Mike.
us just because. So Mike, this was a real pleasure having you on. Really liked getting, like, not just your insights on horror, but your insights on bourbon and whiskey, and really kind of made drinking tonight elevated a little bit, and makes me forget that I'm an alcoholic, because I'm, like, if I'm doing it because we're tasting and we're doing this, it's okay. So I'm just gonna remember that when I have my 10 drinks tomorrow. And no, for real. But it was such a blast having you. Just one word to wrap things up. Like, where can people find you? Like, how do they contact you? Here's your chance to tell our millions of listeners.
As I mentioned, like, if you want to get a gist of what I do, at Whiskey Morgue on Instagram. On YouTube, it's if you search up Whiskey Morgue, it's a good opportunity to kind of see what I'm doing with the podcast. You'll likely also see what I do with a Rue Morgue magazine, which is like kind of an offshoot, called Horror on the Rocks, where I kind of deviate from just whiskey and do a whole bunch of different spirits cocktails, kind of like what I do on my personal platform, but with kind of like a wider net in terms of like pairing some of my favorite films. We go kind of by like a category or genre, and I'll pair like a drink cocktail with a film. So you can find me on YouTube there, and www.whiskeymorgue.com is like my merch stuff. And I feel like I don't ever plug it enough, but like, it's like my passion project to make cool shit. I know, like, Jerry, you've picked up some stuff which I'm immensely appreciative of, and I can't believe people even fucking buy some of these ideas I come up with. But yeah, it's I think, like, the important thing to say is, like, the whiskeymorgue.com, like, yeah, it's merch, but for me, when I started this, it's always been about building community. I feel like in that same vein, that's why I found you guys, that there's more of us out there who just sometimes want to have a drink and watch horror. And as much as I nerd out sometimes on my platform, I can get like into like technical reviews and whatnot. At the end of the day, I just want to hang out, pour a good drink, and watch a film. And I think we all want to do that, even if it's not horror. So I feel like that's kind of like the common ground that, like, especially with the older we get, you want to take a moment. You're like, long day. What's your moment of like serenity? Is just pouring that drink, putting on a movie. That's what I want like everyone to tap into. It's kind of been always more about the community and like shared identity rather than it is about me being at the forefront of like what Whiskey Morgue is. So
hell yeah,
thank you
man.
guys.
Cheers to that, man. Let's do
Yeah,
one more
love this
cheers,
drink.
'cause,
Let's finish it off.
I mean, like Mike really kind of like said exactly what we're all about. So that's it. We feel the same way. Cheers to that.
Cheers, everyone. All right. I hope everyone has a good night. Hopefully, you're all nice and liquored up and are going to put on one of the Elm Street movies. All right. So I think the next episode we're going to talk about Companion. I believe.
Talk about a movie very similar to Maydroid. Is what we're
I just watched Companion today.
Yeah. A movie that may or may not.
Maydroid, by any chance.
It may or may not have ripped off a movie that I did a few years ago. We will find out.
Oh, really?
Right. No, I don't know. Basically, I made a movie about a sexy AI robot maid, and lots of people are copying that nowadays. So anytime I see an AI female in a movie, I'm thinking, oh, I wonder when my check is coming.
Yeah, I get a lot of messages. People are like, "This seems like Maydroid to me." I'm like, I will be the judge of that. I'm like, Rich wants to actually watch it, so we'll find out.
Yeah, I created the genre of sexy robot AIs. So thank you. You're welcome.
So Maydroid.
So I've directed two movies called that are in the universe. One is called Maydroid. One is called Maydroid Origins, and they're both very different movies. And you should definitely check them out. You can find them on Tubi. Thanks for the plug, everybody. But yeah.
Basically, I don't even know if we're still recording right now. This is me just like
no.
Well, we're only recording
because we got to pump Rich up again.
Yeah, we're plugging my movie.
How many films have you made, and what's coming out on Tubi soon?
Yeah. So I've written and directed 10 feature films. My newest one, Feral, I believe is coming out Friday, whatever Friday is. Look forward for that. It's a really sexy LGBTQ dark thriller that is super fun. But yeah, so I've done lots of different movies, but yeah, I did two movies in the major universe. Subservience really ripped me off with Megan Fox, and then Blumhouse has a movie Soulmate, which is basically the exact plot of my first Maydroid movie.
And then isn't there Black Eyed Susan?
I haven't heard of that, but if I would like a check from
probably, yeah. Let's check the dates on these to see like when they came out, because.
Yeah. But anyway, that's me. You should check out all of my movies on Tubi, but definitely check out Maydroid and look out for Feral. All right, I'm done plugging.
We'll close at that. Have a great night, everyone.
Peace.